The following program is a presentation of Far Sky Media. All content is property of Far Sky Media and its affiliates. This program was recorded and produced at the Far Sky Media Little Willow Studios.
Today I have a story about how quickly life can change. You can never plan for this, you're never ready for it, but you just have to do it. So this is a story about my second son and how his life changed in a matter of minutes. He just took his brother, dropped him off at a friend's house. He came home and he was going to shower and get ready and then head out himself to the same get together with friends. So he was just taking a shower. He was downstairs getting ready. Didn't think anything of it. I was upstairs reading my book. The other kids were around sitting. My husband was upstairs also. All of a sudden I stopped reading and I said, "What's that sound?" I noticed that the kids were looking around and like, "We don't hear anything." I said, "No, there's a sound coming from somewhere. What is it?" So I started walking around my living room and my husband points upstairs. He's like, "Is it coming up there?" I said, "It's not coming from up there." I said, "What is that sound?" And they said they didn't hear anything. And I kept walking around and then I ended up walking downstairs and I found my son face down on the floor and he had pools of sweat on his back. And I said, "What happened? Did you fall down?" And he's like, "I can't get up. I can't move. I can't." You could tell he was in pain. And he's like, "I can't move." And I said, "Did you fall? Did you hit your head? What happened?" And I was just trying to ask him why he was laying on the floor because I was confused also. And he goes, "I can't get up. I can't get up." So I ran upstairs and I got a washcloth and I came downstairs and I tried to help wipe his back off because there was literally pools of sweat gathering in his spine. And I put that cloth on him and he just screamed and he goes, "Get it off, it hurts so bad." And I yanked it off and I dropped it on the floor and I'm like, "What do you need? What happened?" And I just didn't know how to help him because I did not understand this whole situation. And he's like, "I don't know, it hurt so bad." And he could not even raise his head. He was just laying on the floor. And then all of a sudden his language started to slur. And I ran upstairs to my husband and I said, "We have to help him." I go, "I need your help, get down here." And I started yelling for everyone to help. And I said, "Give me my phone." And I called my neighbor because I know that she's a nurse. And I was trying to explain things to her and she's like, "Do you need me to come over there?" And I said, "Would you please? I don't understand what's going on." And so she's like, "I'll be on my way." So I ran downstairs and I said, "Trenton, what's going on?" And I still tried to ask him if he hit his head, how this happened. And all of a sudden, he stopped talking. And I ran up our outside stepway from our garage to go upstairs to the outside, and I saw my neighbor pulling into our driveway, and I said, "He's down this way." And she came down there, and she had her first aid kit, and she was tending to him, and my husband and I called 911 to get extra help there. And she started asking us questions too, and I gave her what little information I had, which wasn't much. And I said, "I have no idea. This is what happened. I came downstairs and he was already laying down here. And all of a sudden he was gasping for air." And she's like, "Trenton, you got to keep breathing." And she was taking care of him. And when I called 911, they had the ambulance and first responders come and they asked me who was there. And I told them my neighbor who is a nurse and that. And she's like, "Well, since you have help, they're on their way. I'm going to let you go." So 911 hung up on us. It was just almost in a blur. I can't even explain what happened. So first responders get there, cops get there, and it's just very chaotic. And my husband and I almost stood there frozen watching the whole scene, and the officers are asking us questions like, "What was my son doing? What does he do on a normal basis?" And that they're checking him because why would a young 20-year-old child all of a sudden fall unconscious? So we knew they were looking for drugs. I didn't know what to do, but I'm like, "Just treat him. We can deal with that later on. Just treat him." They were giving him Narcan. He was responding to nothing. And even when the ambulance got there and they had to stay in our driveway for the longest time, it seemed like, to try to get him stable enough to move. And then my other son came home and he's like, "What happened? He just dropped me off a little while ago." And I said, "We don't know." And the ambulance is still in our driveway and the cops are stopping us like, "Who is he?" And I said, "That's his brother." So they're asking us all questions like, "Do you know who his friends are? What's going on here?" We gave them all the information because we just wanted him treated and taken care of. And the cop even came up to me, one of the officers came up to me and they're like, "We have no idea you. If you find out what this actually is, could you give us a call back later? And it just, I know I was in shock because I don't know what even was going on. So he finally gets in the ambulance is moving to take him to the hospital, and we jump in the vehicle. We leave our kids because the 3 younger ones, they're in middle school, going into high school. Still, I knew they could take care of themselves. And their brother was there, and I kind of just blanked on them. I know this son needed more help than they did, so I kind of just left my other kids. And my husband and I followed the ambulance to the hospital. And when we got there, we were told right away that this isn't good. We did a CT scan, and that med flight is being called. You have to prepare yourself because this isn't good. The lady from the ambulance committee said, she even came up and talked to us and said, this doesn't look good. We had a hard time getting him stable, and she just had no answers for us also. So we knew that he was going to be med flighted, and we had to drive over an hour to get to the next hospital. On our way, I got a phone call. It was med flight asking us for permission to do surgery as soon as they landed. And I gave them all permission, and I was just crying. And I told my husband, I said, we're going to lose him, aren't we? And my husband didn't say anything, and we just kept driving. And as soon as we get to the next hospital, we are greeted at the doors, and I automatically looked at the lady's name tag, and I was just drawn to it, and it said organ donor. And I'm like, oh my gosh, she's not gonna make it. We have someone here. And she flipped her name tag over, and she said, I work in a different department now. They just didn't make me a new name badge. And she just took us to the waiting room, and that's where we waited for hours and hours and hours and hours. And families started showing up to the waiting room, and they lived over 2 hours away, but people started showing up to support us because that's what our family does. They come together when we need them. We might not talk for a while, we might not always be there immediately in each other's lives every day, but when it really counts, our family comes together. I sent messages to my brothers that were out of town and just to let them know, saying he was med flighted. I don't have much information right now. And my brothers are very quiet people. And after a little while, I get a message back like, what's going on? I can't sleep anymore because it was in the middle of the night when all this was going on. All I can think about is him. What's going on? And again, we had no information because he was in surgery for hours. And then finally they came out and they said, surgery is done, but we don't have much information for you. So then we were taken to his room up in ICU. Part of his head was shaved. He had tubes coming out everywhere. It was just, he was still alive. So we sat there, and then we had my sister-in-law stayed home with the kids because that's where they were needed. Family really stepped up for us. And I feel bad that I kind of neglected my younger kids, but I knew they would be taken care of. So then we waited. And then I had to make a call because actually 2 of my kids that were home, we were in the process of adopting them. And I just didn't know this whole process too because that was kind of new to us. So I called their social worker during the day and I said, just to let you know, this is what's going on with our family right now. And she's like, oh, we can put them into respite care. You don't have to worry about them. And I remember that I just kind of yelled at her and I said, you are not taking my kids away from me. And I said, I was just letting you know the family situation because legally I have to let you know major changes. And I said, but you are not taking my kids away from me. And she said, okay. I said, we will get through this because I knew we would because I had all this other family support. This is what's going on with our family. It's kind of major right now, but you are not taking my kids away from me. So she let it go. She's like, okay, but if you need them, I said, I don't. I said, my kids are staying with us. That was that part of that conversation. It seemed like there was always a lot going on. So my son was in a coma for like 2 weeks from when he stopped talking to me in the basement until after surgeries, and he had like 3 surgeries on his brain until one day they said we have to wake him up to see if he's brain dead, to see if there's any functions. Otherwise, we have to do the next step. So that day, we were waiting to see if he was going to wake up. And I remember that I was on one side of it holding his hand, and the nurse was on the other side, and they're like saying his name, saying, you have to start waking up. Hey, are you there? Everything else. And I swear I felt a little flutter in his fingers of the one I was holding him because we were all talking to him, trying to get him to wake up. And I'm like, I felt it. And they're like, oh, we'll just wait and see, because I'm sure families say that all the time and they are very hopeful. But I had no doubt that his fingers moved in my hand. And then a little bit later, finally he started coming to, and then he opened his eyes, and then they were doing all this test with him, and he was fine. But during that time when he was in the coma, they had to do a tracheotomy, so he could not talk. Part of his body did shut down in that, and I was going on what the doctors told me because I didn't know. I was relying on them to do the best thing for them because, again, I've never been in this situation. I didn't know all the ins and outs of it. So we agreed to the tracheotomy and that because they said that he wasn't able to swallow and he could gag, and there was a long thing that they were giving us, and I just didn't want him to suffer anymore. And that's about the only thing I wish I would have tried. But in hindsight, you have to do the best decision that you have at the moment. So he had a tracheotomy, so when he was coming out of this coma, he couldn't talk. So the nurses are like, oh, blink once for yes, twice for no. So I remember we're all studying and leaning over and looking at his face. And was that a slow blink? Was that a one blink? Was that two? We didn't know that. So I finally said, squeeze my hand once for yes and twice for no. So that became his communication for the longest time. We could only phrase yes and no questions to him. And then they even put that on his board. He will squeeze hands instead of blinking. I don't know why they would use blinking all the time because it never worked for us. It might work for some people and never worked for us. So we at least could get him to communicate with us. And he was, I guess you would say better because he was awake, but we still didn't know what was going to happen with him. He could not move. It's not that he was paralyzed, but he just lost a lot in this time frame. So one night I was staying, because either my husband or I or both of us would stay with him every single night. And one night it was my turn and I was by myself, and all of a sudden one of his machines started beeping. And a nurse came in, quieted it down, and she left. And all of a sudden it beeped again. And then she ran back in, she silenced it, and she noticed that I was waking up every time, and she's like, oh, the person that's in charge of this was helping someone in another room. When she gets here and that, she'll be able to fix why it was beeping or whatever else. And then it beeped the third time. And she ran back in after a little while to silence it, pushed a button to silence it for how long I'd ever silenced. I don't know that number. But the fourth time, I decided to time it, and no one showed up. And that thing beeped for over 20 minutes in the middle of the night. Then finally, someone showed up, and they were doing all this thing, and I said, what is that machine for? And they were rattling off all the medical terms, but they're like, oh, it's to help with some respiratory thing. I said, is it important? I said, because if it's not important, I said, get it off him. Because if that machine beeped for over 20 minutes because it wasn't working correctly, and you guys didn't care about it, I said, then get it off him. They're like, well, it is kind of important. It helps with his breathing and it lets us know if things aren't working correctly. And I said, then why did it go off for 20 minutes? And this is all happening in the middle of the night. And I was very upset because that's my child. And if they can't do their job correctly, I might have to take him somewhere else so he's getting the best care possible, because I'm relying on these people, these professionals, to do the right thing for my child. And the lady's like, well, we were just so busy and we were here and there. And I didn't care about her excuses. And I'm sure she was helping other people. I'm sure they weren't on break at that time, but I was only worried about my own child. So the next morning I asked to talk to the doctors and the nurses that were on Trenton's care team. They acted like I was almost wasting their time because the doctor came in. He's like, you needed to talk to all of us and that about something. And I just asked them pointed questions like, why is this done? Why is this happening? Can you explain if this is going to get better? Can you do this for my child? And they knew that I wasn't going to let things slide. And I was not very pleasant about it. And yes, I was under a lot of stress, but I needed them to do the right thing for my child. Then after a few weeks, Trenton, I guess, was good enough that he had to get out of ICU and he was going to be moved to a rehab hospital. So we got that all figured out. And now he's in a whole new building, a whole new room, and he was going to rehab. So we get him all situated there, and I get him a whole pile of clothes. I bring everything he needs since he wasn't going to be in a hospital gown every day. I even went out and we got him some new socks because young people don't really care about having clean socks or socks that aren't stained, but it's just something I could do at that time. So I got him some new clothes, and I made sure that they were all there and ready to be used whenever he needed them. And the nurse and that, very friendly people, but she made a comment to me one time. She's like, yeah, at first I thought it was a drug overdose because he was so young, so we assumed it was just a drug overdose, and that just struck me as odd. I could care less the reason why people are in rehab centers. At that moment, I didn't care if my son was a drug addict. He deserved to have the same treatment and the best treatment to get better. And it wasn't a drug overdose. And she's like, yeah. And then I read his chart and I saw it was an AVM, which meant he had a blood vessel that burst in his head and ruptured and caused a stroke. So my 20-year-old son had a stroke. So we're in the rehab hospital and I was livid that this comment came out of her mouth because, again, everyone deserves the best treatment no matter what the reason they are there for. So I called a meeting with all his doctors and nurses at the very beginning because I didn't want this to go on. And this is a learning hospital. Being a teacher, why would you teach people to treat others a certain way based on information or even preconceived notions? So I called them together and they wanted to know that nurse's name. And I would not give it to them. And I said, it does not matter what the nurse's name was. It's someone that works in this hospital. And she didn't mean it in a bad way. I know she didn't. But for that impression to be on their mind, that I don't even know label, it does not matter the reason. It was a comment made and it needs to stop. And again, even if my son was a drug addict, which he's not, he still deserves the best care possible because he's at your hospital for a specific reason, and that is to get rehab to get better. I didn't care if they get paid way more than me. They are very qualified at their positions. I was letting them know that I was not going to let this slide, and I expected things done a certain way with my child. And then I noticed some other things that weren't right in that hospital. I was sitting there one day because every single night I would get done with work, I would drive to the hospital. When he was in ICU, whether I was staying that night or not, I was there every single day so my son would not be alone. My husband was there as much as he can. He was there all weekend long, but sometimes he would stay back with the younger kids, but no questions asked. He knew I was leaving every single night to go to the ICU or the rehab center because my son was not going to be alone. So one day I was sitting there and one of the therapists came in and they're like, are you ready? And I think it was speech at the time. Trenton, are you ready for your speech? And he shook his head no, and she said, okay. And she turned around and walked out. And I just looked at Trenton and I kind of looked at the door, got up and I went out and I said, excuse me. And I said, when is his therapy now? And she's like, oh, this was his only scheduled time today and he didn't want to do it. And we can't force people to do it, so he's not having it today. And I said, what? She's like, well, we can't force people to do rehab. And she goes, we asked him if he wanted to do it and he said no. And I said, then rephrase your question. She's like, what? I said, he's here for rehab. He needs to do rehab. She's like, but we can't force people to do it. And I said, but your question left them a way out. And I said, rephrase the question. And I said, do you want to get ready to do it now? Or do you need a couple minutes to get ready? She's like, well, I guess we can ask him that. I said, they're at rehab. They need to do rehab. And we were told that if things all went well, he was going to get out December 18th. And for some reason, that date stuck in my head, and he was going to go home December 18th. So he needed to do rehab. And she's like, well, he already refused today, so I can't make him. And I said, then from now on, you're going to ask him the question a different way because he's going to do rehab. And she said, okay. And she turned and walked away, and I went back into his room, and I said, okay, you've had a lot happen to you, and you have every right to be upset. Every right, because your life is turned upside down, and you have every right to have a bad day, but you cannot have 2 bad days in a row. And he was looking at me, and I said, do you agree with this? And he shook his head yes. And I said, so if you have a bad day, the next day you're going to work hard because you can't have 2 bad days in a row. We need you to get better, and we need you to improve so you can come home. So that was our deal at that time, and he did that. And I honestly don't think that he ever missed another rehab thing. He's a very strong child. But I was just perplexed that the hospital would allow this. And yes, people can refuse treatment, but they were giving them an out by their question, and they shouldn't be doing that. And then another day I walked into my son's room and I noticed he was still wearing the same clothes that he had on yesterday. And since he had all these brain surgeries and his muscles was very weak, his head was kind of tilted down and he drooled a lot. And you could see the ring of drool on his shirt, and he was still wearing the same clothes as yesterday. So I went to the nurse's station and I said, why is he still in the same clothes as yesterday? And they're like, oh, well, we just didn't have time. And I said, can I have the supplies? I will give him a sponge bath myself because he can't stay in this filthy clothes all the time. So I went back in his room and I got the washcloth and whatever soap they are allowed to use. And I started taking his shirt off and I was wiping him up, and I noticed that he had these little dots, because when your skin is dirty and sitting in filth for so long, it gets irritated. So I was not happy about that. So we got him all cleaned up, new clothes on him. And then the next day when I came in, his room was quarantined. And they're like, oh, you have to be all gowned up and that. We think he has chickenpox. I said, he does not have chickenpox. And they're like, well, he has spots all over him. I said, he does not have chickenpox. And they're like, well, until the tests come back, he's quarantined right now. So if you want to go in his room, you have to gown all up. I said, I'm not gowning up. I said, I know my son. I know he doesn't have chickenpox. It's probably because you guys didn't bathe him and get him clean enough and his skin is irritated. Well, they didn't like to hear that, but I was very defensive at the time because I want my son protected and I want my son taken care of, and they were not going to keep me away from my son. So we went around and around about that, and I walked in his room and I was not gowned up. And right or wrong, I was furious again at this point because I just want my son taken care of. He's gone through so much, they're not going to keep his family away from him too. And I think I did wear the gown once or twice, but I wouldn't wear the mask and the 100% thing, but I did put the yellow gown, paper gown thing on for a little bit. And they just said, well, we have to wait to see if he has chickenpox. And I said, he does not have chickenpox. He was vaccinated for that a long time ago. They're like, well, do you know the date? And I said, I actually do. I have his vaccination card in my purse. I said, let me get it for you. So I walked back in his room because that's where my purse was. I came back out with my billfold and I pulled out his vaccination card. And they're like, oh, well, this is helpful, which I don't know why they couldn't pull it up on the registry because they're a hospital and they should be all in the database. I had to prove again why they weren't doing something right. So they're like, well, until the tests come back and that we can't take the quarantine thing off. Well, lo and behold, the test came back and he did not have anything, let alone chickenpox. And they just couldn't figure out why he had spots all over him. And again, I reminded them that skin gets irritated when it's dirty and not cleaned. So maybe if they would just get his soaked drool shirt off him and take care of him, he wouldn't have these problems. And that wasn't the issue, they thought. And they were trying to tell me that I was just a crazy overacting mother. But I just cut them off because I didn't want to hear that. But I just think back at that whole situation, and come December 18th, he was able to come home because he was far enough along, still a long ways to go, but he was able to come home December 18th. And we changed our whole house around to help him. But looking back, all the help that we had along the way, our family really stepped up and helped. Our jobs gave us the time off that we needed to help our son. I remember I had to take the whole month of February off because we had no one that was able to stay with him. So I got the whole month of February off to stay home with him every single day because he couldn't even go to the bathroom by himself. He was in a wheelchair, and he's not in a wheelchair today. He had to learn how to walk, talk, and eat again. He had to have home therapy sessions. And that one day in the ICU before he woke up from his coma, I remember sitting next to him. And my husband was there too, but I looked at Trenton. I said, Trenton, if it's your time to go, we will make peace with this. And I don't know what's going to happen, and I don't know why this happened. But if it's your time to go and be free, and we will find a way to make peace with this. And then he woke up a couple days later. Because I said, if you are going to come back, whatever you need, we will help you get through this. So we were there every step of the way. And I came home one day, and my oldest son was home from college. And that was a whole great ordeal too. His college helped him with some things. He went to college over 3 hours away, and he had friends drive him home, and just so many wonderful people in this world that really step up and do the right thing. So his friends came and brought him home. And then when he was on break for college, he was Trenton's main caregiver. He said, I'm doing this for him. I'm helping him up. I'm going to be here. I'm doing this until I have to go back. So he took care of everything for Trenton. Trenton couldn't speak yet, so we had a bell that if he had to go to the bathroom, he would ring the bell. And our whole life was how we were going to make things better for Trenton and get him back to where he wants to be. And is he back 100%? I would say in the 90s somewhere, upper 90s. His speech is not the same as it was, but it's still my son. This is my son. He can walk now, he's independent. He's still not 100% of what he was, but we have our son back. It's very, very close. Just his speech is different. He has never raised his voice. He will not yell, and it's been over 8 years. He just never got that part back. But he, like I said, he had to walk, talk, and eat again. He can do all that, and he's an independent person. He worked hard to get back his life. He celebrated his 21st birthday in rehab. What a journey for his life. And I did call the police department back. I came home, I don't know how soon it was, a couple days after everything, but I had that in my head, and I called that police department and I said, on this day, they responded to our home and they just wanted an update, so can you give them a message for me? And they actually remembered our name. In the instance, they're like, oh, what do you have? And I said, he had a blood vessel rupture in his head. He had a stroke, and we never heard anything from them since. And my husband was very upset that they were searching our house for drugs, and I said they were just doing their job too. And my brother said, why would you let them do that? At the moment, I was just worried about my son. Did I do everything right through that whole thing? I have no idea. I was a mother doing what was right by her son. My husband was a father. He was looking out for his son. We had to rely on people to give us the best information they had because we did not know. Is everyone as fortunate as us? We know they're not. We know this could have ended in a death of our son because many other people told us stories and that of how people had the same thing happen to them, but their person passed away. How quickly our life changed, but we had a better outcome because we are still with our son still today. We still have him in our lives. We have a very close family. Be thankful for what you have. I know I am, because I know how quickly things can change.
This has been a Far Sky Media presentation. All content is property of Far Sky Media and its affiliates. Visit us at farskymedia.com for more information and programs. Thanks for joining us today. This program was recorded and produced at the Far Sky Media Little Willow Studios.